Dearborn School in Roxbury is a surprisingly distinctive structure. At first glance, it's nothing special, just a massive building a stone's throw from Dudley Square. Look closer, though, and striking details emerge, including several flourishes that evoke ancient Greece. But you may not be able to see them for much longer. The city plans to demolish the Dearborn to build a new science, technology, engineering, and math school, a decision that has many neighborhood residents crying foul.
Look at the structure. You know, the magnitude of it. And this could very well be used for senior citizens or any other type of housing that, you know, the city deems fit. I mean, housing is needed around here, affordable housing. And this could very well suit that case.
They told us that this is a very special type of education, STEM, and that this building won't accommodate the classrooms and the curriculum that they've anticipated. And that sounds gimmicky. Everyone loves Boston Latin School. Kids learn math and science there and go on to great colleges like Harvard, and they don't miss the fact that they don't have an environment that looks like a Google office building.
Boston Mayor Marty Walsh has said that rehabbing the Dearborn would be too expensive. But this week, the Massachusetts Historical Commission formally asked the city to consider building the new Dearborn somewhere else. And my next guest thinks that's probably the right way to go. Greg Gaylor is the executive director of the Boston Preservation Alliance. Greg, welcome to Greater Boston.
Thanks for having me.
So let me just ask you at the outset, why should this building be saved?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, and sometimes I think we ask the question the wrong way. Maybe the question should be asked, why do we have to lose this building? Are there opportunities to do something different? The Alliance's position isn't necessarily that we know the answer, and the city really hasn't asked the questions correctly yet.
What are some of the traits, and in a way, by asking this, I'm sort of ignoring your suggestion that we reformulate, but what are some of the traits that make this building unique or distinctive? We saw some of those classical details, the columns, the ornate carvings in the facade. What else is notable about this architecturally?
Well, this building's an integral part of this neighborhood, as you saw from some of the community advocates you spoke with and the people who really got us engaged in this issue. They don't want to see their neighborhood change, like many areas of the city. The city's history isn't just made up of the Freedom Trail and sites like that. It's throughout the neighborhoods. And this building played an important part in two parts of the city's history. In terms of education of women, it was one of the first buildings dedicated for industrial education for women, and then in the busing scandal.
When you say industrial education, you mean sort of vocational technical stuff, right?
Right, exactly.
What happened at the Dearborn during the busing scandal? Then it was Roxbury High School, right?
That's correct. And this was known as one of the more quiet places during the busing scandal. It was, my understanding, it was teamed with South Boston. And in the end, not a lot of students came here, and the attendance went down. But it's a complex story and a complex part of our history, and it should be considered as part of the story for what to do with the building.
If, hypothetically, the city heeded the request of advocates and neighbors and built the new Dearborn somewhere else and found an alternate use for this building, what alternate use can you imagine it serving? I mean, it's a huge structure, and I don't know preservation, I don't know building, but I would imagine that converting it into, say, apartments would be really, really expensive.
Well, one thing to consider, and I think this is something the city has failed to consider when we've asked this question, is they say, oh, it's too expensive, we looked at the numbers. But you have to realize you're looking at apples and oranges. When a private developer experienced in rehabilitation of historic buildings for something like housing works, some of them can get up to 80% rebates and tax credits when they team affordable housing tax credits with historic preservation tax credits. So you have to look at it in a different way than the city has been looking at it. What
is going to happen now procedurally, now that the Mass Historical Commission has said, hey, we think you should consider not doing this? What now unfolds?
Well, the city and the MSBA, the state agency who's funding this project,
School Building Authority, right?
That's correct. They're actually required to do, and they were required to file with the Mass Historical Commission for their review, which they really should have done months ago. And they're required now to develop some alternative analysis, which they should have done long ago. So just so I'm clear and viewers are clear, has the city looked at alternate sites around Roxbury and said, well, could we build here? What would it cost? Would it work? Or have they not done that analysis? They have not done that. The only limited look they seem to have done is to look at some other school building properties. But the city has not looked at alternative sites. You have tried to work with the city to get them to come around to your point of view and been, I think, a little disappointed with the response you've received, correct? That's true. We reached out to the city months ago and explained and reminded them and the MSBA that part of the requirement is if there's state funding in a project, they need to file with the Mass Historical Commission, let them know what they're going to do, and have the MHC respond. We knew, given they were proposing demolishing the building, the agency would respond in what's called an adverse effect ruling, but they waited and waited and waited to file. In the meantime, we reached out and offered to help try to connect them with some developers, people on our board, people experienced in these sort of conversion projects, to see if conversion of the Dearborn to an alternate use was viable. We believe it is, but we haven't worked the numbers either. But when we tried to get the city to let us help, they really didn't accept the offer.
One more question, just briefly. How, broadly speaking, has the Walsh administration been on preservation issues so far?
We've been, talking with the city administration. It's still early. There's been some changes to the Boston Landmarks Commission, and we're excited that some new staff is finally on board. So we need to build some new relationships. The mayor has expressed publicly many times that he understands that the character of the city is important, but I, to be honest, find it a little frustrating in this case, where the city should be the exemplar and the perfect example to demonstrate how you deal with a historic property, that you assess alternatives before you move towards demolition. In this case, the city hasn't done that.
All right. Greg Gaylor, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.